Welcome back to WION World is One. You're watching Speed News with me, Vidur Kathuria. Let's get started. The White House has said Venezuela's interim government must take orders from the US despite Venezuela's interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez, insisting no foreign power is in charge. The Trump administration has said that it intends to dictate the decisions of Venezuela's interim leaders and control the country's oil sales indefinitely after Maduro's capture. Meanwhile, Rodriguez has said that Venezuela is willing to establish respectful energy relations through commercial agreements. Washington has said it had seized a Russian-linked oil tanker after pursuing it from Venezuela. Earlier, Trump had announced an agreement for Venezuela to hand over between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil to the United States for it to then sell. The White House says President Trump is actively discussing the purchase of Greenland. Trump has said diplomacy is the preferred path, but military options are not off the table. Denmark has strongly rejected the idea, claiming it would be the end of NATO. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said he will meet with leaders of Denmark on tensions around Greenland. Meanwhile, the European Union has pledged full support to Denmark and Greenland, insisting sovereignty and international law must be respected. Germany, France, and Poland have echoed those concerns. About 100 protesters gathered in the front of the US Embassy in Budapest to protest against the US decision to topple Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Protesters shouted slogans and called for stopping American imperialism. They also voiced criticism of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who said that the move should have a positive impact on world energy markets and it would be beneficial for Hungary. Venezuelan opposition leader and 2025 Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado will publish a book that lays out her vision for Venezuela's political reconstruction as the country faces significant upheaval. The 120-page work titled The Freedom Manifesto is being released by Regnery Publishing. According to the publisher, Machado's book, which she wrote before the US capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife earlier this month, expands upon her vision of a new era for a Venezuela without its dictator Nicolas Maduro. A US immigration agent shot and killed a 37-year-old woman in her car in Minneapolis. This marks the latest incident of violence during President Donald Trump's nationwide crackdown on migrants. The Trump administration also said the woman was a rioter who, in her vehicle, allegedly attempted to run over law enforcement officers. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem described the incident an act of domestic terrorism. The Trump administration has issued a new nutrition advice urging Americans to avoid highly processed foods along with added sugars. New dietary guidelines rolled out at the White House recommend more protein, less sugar, and less highly processed food in one's diet. This while the Trump administration encourages consumption of red meat and full-fat dairy. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Agricultural Secretary Brooke Collins said that the Trump administration will now turn its focus to ensuring federal nutrition programs follow the new guidelines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that no additional demands should be placed on Ukraine in peace talks. Zelensky also called on Kyiv's allies to step up their pressure on Russia, in particular via sanctions. During a speech at a ceremony, Zelensky sought progress on EU membership talks and tougher sanctions on Moscow. Calling on Cyprus to move membership negotiations forward, during its EU presidency. A Saudi-led coalition struck the home province of Yemen's UAE-backed separatist leader after he failed to show up for talks in Riyadh and was kicked out of the country's presidential body. The coalition said it had given Idros al-Zubaydi a 48-hour ultimatum to come to Riyadh for discussions after his Southern Transitional Council grabbed swathes of territory last month. Meanwhile, forces were deployed in Aden following directives from head of Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council to maintain security. At least 12 people have reportedly been killed during 2 days of intense clashes between Syrian government and Kurdish fighters in the northern city of Aleppo. Tens of thousands of civilians have also fled the Kurdish-majority neighborhood of Sheikh Maqsood and Ashrafiyeh, which the Syrian army shelled on Wednesday afternoon. This is after it designated them as closed military areas. The government said the operation was a response to attacks by armed groups in the areas and was solely aimed at preserving security. Israelis rallied in Jerusalem, with some demanding for an independent state commission of inquiry into the events of October 7, 2023. Protesters said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government refused to be held accountable for the Hamas-led attack on Israel that triggered the war in Gaza. The remains of the last Israeli hostage, police officer Ran Vili, have still not been returned from Gaza. His retrieval is crucial to a plan brokered by the US government to ensure peace between Gaza and Israel. Chinese spokeswoman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mao Ning, said that Beijing's decision to strengthen export control on dual-use items to Japan is fully legitimate, reasonable and lawful. According to the Ministry of Commerce, China's decision to prohibit the export of all dual-use items to Japanese military users for any other end users and end-use purposes that help enhance Japan's military capabilities is in effect since Tuesday. It also said organizations or individuals from any country or region that violate the provisions by transferring or supplying relevant Chinese dual-use items to Japan will be held legally accountable. Malibu in Southern California marks 1 year of devastating fires that killed over 30 people in the Palisades and Eaton. More than 16,000 homes, businesses and other structures were destroyed, with some estimates as high as $250 billion in damage. In recent years, Southern California has been battling some of the worst wildfires in history. Bosnia faced a combination of extreme weather challenges as heavy snow and rain hit the Western Balkans. Some areas, including the town of Konjic, southwest of Sarajevo, faced intense snowfall that blocked roads. Other areas faced floods and high water levels in rivers. In historic Mostar, some tourists braved the cold conditions to see the iconic 16th century Mostar Old Bridge. North India continues to reel under an intense cold wave, with lowering temperatures recorded across various states. The national capital and adjacent areas remain engulfed in dense fog for the third straight day, after New Delhi recorded its first cold day of the year on January 6th. Low visibility has also been reported in several areas across north, central and eastern India, while India's southern states are preparing for heavy rain and thunderstorms. Children and adults alike sledged and skied down a snowy hill in Hungary's capital Budapest. Houses and vehicles are covered in thick layers of snow in various areas. Meteorologists say Budapest is facing heaviest snow in nearly 15 years. A sudden spell of sub-zero temperatures across Britain has frozen floodwaters in Port Meadow and the surrounding plains in Oxford, turning them into a natural ice rink. Drone footage captured skaters gliding across the frozen, shallow floodplain of Port Meadow as the cold snap persists. Meanwhile, Britain is bracing for a dramatic shift in weather on Thursday as storm Goretti makes landfall. The Meteorological Office has issued danger to life warnings for snow and wind. Asia-Pacific markets traded mixed on Thursday after Wall Street fell, as comments from US President Donald Trump and sliding oil prices weighed on sentiment. US defense stocks dropped after Trump said he would block dividends and buybacks until companies fix issues around executive pay and production. Japan's Nikkei fell nearly 0.7%, dragged down by technology and material stocks. Hong Kong's Hang Seng slid about 1%, led lower by tech names including Lenovo, Baidu, and Kuaishou. In contrast, South Korea's Kospi gained more than 1%. Australia's market was little changed. Overall, investors remained cautious amid geopolitical tensions and policy uncertainty. Oil prices ticked higher on Thursday after US crude inventories fell by about 3.8 million barrels, much more than expected, prompting some buying after 2 days of losses. Brent rose to about $60.34 a barrel. Oversupply concerns persist, with analysts forecasting a potential global surplus this year. Markets are also focused on Venezuelan developments. Washington is moving to secure Venezuelan oil exports and revenues, including negotiating expanded Chevron operations, seizing Venezuela-linked tankers and arranging access to up to $2 billion in crude that might otherwise have gone to China. Geopolitical risk, however, may be tempered by ample supply expectations. Gold prices fell more than 1% as investors locked in profits after a strong rally, dragging spot gold briefly to session lows before it pared losses. Prices were pressured by profit-taking, though weaker than expected US jobs data helped limit the downside by reinforcing expectations for Federal Reserve rate cuts later this year. Markets are now pricing in about 61 basis points of easing, with attention turning to Friday's key US payrolls report. Geopolitical uncertainty and continued gold buying by China's central bank provided longer-term support. Other metals saw sharper losses, with silver, platinum, and palladium all under pressure. The US dollar held steady as investors digested mixed economic signals ahead of Friday's crucial jobs report. The euro and sterling were little changed, while the yen hovered near 156.8 per dollar, reflecting cautious trading. Data showed US job openings and hiring slowed, pointing to a no-hire, no-fire labor market, even as services activity picked up late last year. That mixed picture is reinforcing expectations the Federal Reserve will stay cautious on rates, with markets pricing in 2 cuts this year. Geopolitical tensions, including US action in Venezuela and Asia, had limited impact, while traders also await a possible Supreme Court ruling on Trump-era tariffs that could move the dollar. Spotify is expanding its monetization program for creators and rolling out new tools for video podcasters as it steps up competition with YouTube and Netflix. The Swedish streaming company said that it has invested more than $10 billion in the podcast industry over the past 5 years to boost creator earnings, scale engagement, and build infrastructure. Spotify is now lowering the thresholds to join its monetization program a year after the initiative was launched. The move comes as platforms compete for video podcast creators amid growing demand for the format and higher user engagement. China has asked some Chinese technology companies to halt orders for NVIDIA's H200 artificial intelligence chips. According to a report by The Information, the report said the request was issued this week. China is also expected to require companies to purchase domestically made AI chips. The move comes as the US tightens export controls on advanced semiconductors used in AI, putting NVIDIA between US and Beijing. Chinese firms have been seeking to reduce reliance on US designed chips as technology trade tensions escalate. The directive was issued as Beijing considers whether and under what conditions to allow access to NVIDIA's high-performance chips. Dutch chip equipment maker ASML has said claims on social media that the company had been hacked were false. ASML said it was aware of a post published on breach forums on January 6th, alleging the exposure of company information. The company said it conducted a thorough investigation and found the claims to be unfounded. ASML said no company data was exposed in the documents referenced in the post. Holders Barcelona thrashed Athletic Club 5-0 to reach the Spanish Super Cup final. The 15-time winners scored 4 goals in 16 minutes in the first half in Saudi Arabia. Barcelona are the first team in history to score four first-half goals in a Spanish Super Cup semi-final. Ferran Torres, Fermin Lopez, Rooney, Bargui and Rafinha were all on the score sheet for Barcelona. With this win, Barcelona have recorded their 9th consecutive victory across all competitions. Hansi Flick's side will now face either Atletico Madrid or 13-time winners Real Madrid for the trophy. That's it on this edition of Speed News. News and updates will continue on the other side of this short break. Keep watching me on World is One.